everybody, Wildman here, and I'm going to kind of get away from what I normally put videos out about, which is, just giving updates and statuses of the parks I'm building in Planet Coaster. We're going to talk a little bit about zoo design in anticipation of the Planet Zoo game coming out later this year. And, first of all, I just want to put out a couple disclaimers. Number one, I am not claiming at all to be an expert in this topic or in this subject. My reason for doing this is just a high interest in zoo design and how zoos have changed over the years. I do research it a little bit. I do observe this when I visit zoos, and specifically with Brookfield Zoo, which I'm going to use as an example here, is picked because I've been going to that zoo pretty much since I've been 1 year old. So almost 60 years of experience of seeing this zoo change over the years and get better over the years as far as enclosures and livelihoods of the animals, which I know is a very important part of zoos, and I think what's going to be a very important part of this game. So I thought I would just give some personal experience discussions on this topic. I also want to point out that I don't want people to take what I say in this little series that I'm going to do as being negative towards zoos, because I know there's tons of arguments out there with the pros and cons of zoos and should they exist and do they treat animals correctly. And you may see some examples that I point out, from older versions of the zoo or zoos in general, where animals maybe weren't treated as best as they could. But on the flip side, there's a lot of pros about zoos as far as helping animal species grow, learning about the species, and just to share those details with the general public. Now, again, pros and cons. I don't want to get into those arguments. I'm kind of looking at this more from a zoo design standpoint, so that when you play the game, at least virtually in the game, your animals will be as happy as they could be. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about Brookfield Zoo. It's also known as the Chicago Zoological Park, and it's located in a suburb of Chicago called Brookfield, Illinois. And it's one of the older zoos in history. It was actually opened in July of 1934. And currently it houses about 450 different species of animals on about 216 acres. So it's a very large zoo. And I always thought about that as I visited this zoo. It's a zoo that you have to plan on doing a lot of walking in when you do go there. One of the other things about this zoo is when it did open, it gained international recognition for using more moats and ditches in the animal enclosures instead of barred cages that would separate animals from the visitors to the zoo. And that was somewhat earth-shaking design aspects different back in those days, because most of the time zoos were just slapped up with cages and people had to view the animals through bars. Now, I'm not saying that Brookfield didn't have some barred enclosures, but they were an advocate, and again, first ones that really started using, like I said, moats and ditches. The zoo also was one of the first zoos in America to exhibit giant pandas, believe it or not. And one of those pandas, the first one actually, Su Lin, was taxidermied after it passed away and was on display in Chicago's Field Museum of Natural History. And I believe it's still actually there on display. The zoo has had many large money contributors over the years that help keep the zoo in operation and building new exhibits for the animals. It's currently owned by the Cook County Forest Preserve District and managed by the Chicago Zoological Society. And again, they use sponsors and conservation efforts to help fund the zoo and to also help fund those conservation efforts. Okay, everybody, let's move a little bit away from the opening history of the zoo and talk a little bit more about the overall design of the zoo and kind of what the zoo looked like back in the 30s when it actually opened up. So what you're looking at right now is a current satellite view, or actually it's probably a couple years old satellite view of the zoo. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to overlay one of the original map drawings that I found of the zoo. And as you could see, the overall design and layout of the zoo hasn't really changed that much since it was originally opened in 1934. It has that general kind of cross or X type central feature. These are all different garden walkways that went through the zoo, and there is a central garden area, and most of the animal areas were kind of outside that main central garden cross type section. So again, as you can see, nowadays, that general X is still there, or cross is still there, and really the placement of the animals enclosures haven't changed all that much over the years. Now we're going to talk about the general design overall in this episode, and then future episodes I put out will get more and more into detail on the specific animal types or specific areas within the zoo and how they change. But just to kind of give you a layout of what it looked like when it first opened up. You had the major cross garden area. The big cats were located up in this area here. The bears were located here. That was actually called the Bear Grottos. Up along the north edge of the zoo here were a bunch of fenced-in enclosures for hooved animals like antelopes, like deer, antelopes, buffalo, whatever else was there. Some of the other hoofed animals, antelopes and zebras, were in this area. They had some larger enclosures, as you could see. This was called the small antelope area. But even when I started going to the zoo, as a young adult, how these separate areas were set up was there was a central house like this in each little main area, and then those houses had these areas separated like this, basically with chain link fencing, like so. They weren't very intuitive as far as animal enclosures go, but basically as you walked around the paths around each of these, you would see different animals. So here would be zebras, here would be giraffes, here would be ibex, here would be gazelles, and so on. So each section was kind of made up into some smaller sections. Over here in the center of the park were the pachyderms, and again there was a house in the middle, and then rhinos would be here, hippos would be here, elephants would be here, and so on. This little section above the pachyderms was the Australia house. You had kangaroos, emus, and then inside the house were some smaller exhibits. This here was a rock mountain type area that held both monkeys and antelopes. I believe they were ibex. I don't know if they were always ibex, but me going as a kid and a young adult, they were always ibex. And down at the south side of the zoo, in this huge kind of rectangular area, is where most of the houses and or buildings to hold smaller animals. So we had a small like aquatic birdhouse. This is the regular birdhouse, like perching birds. There was a reptile house. There was a monkey house, and there was a small mammal house, and those all kind of were in one big long row. This here was a baboon island, very similar to this island up here that were built for antelopes and monkeys, but it was specifically baboons. And then this was a reflecting pool with some gardens around it where there was swans and peacocks and other waterfowl that would reside there. And pretty much that's what the zoo was made up with. Now, a lot of this stuff wasn't open when the zoo originally opened, but this is what the layout was, and this is pretty much what the layout still is today, with a few exceptions, which, like I said, we'll talk about more detail in future episodes. But one other thing I wanted to point out right now, let me go back to the current view of the zoo. Sorry. And as you could see, most of those houses are still in this area. They have changed and been updated over the years. And one other big major change is the central garden area was replaced by what's called the Roosevelt Fountain, and it's now kind of like the centerpiece of the zoo. One of the other things that I want to point out on the overall change of the zoo, which you'll see, is they added a merry-go-round right here, and it was actually just recently. In a later episode, I'll talk more about the merry-go-round and where it came from and what year it was actually installed. And the other thing I wanted to mention is there used to be a train. It wasn't there originally when the park opened, but I believe in the 50s or so, a train was added. And the train went back around the animal enclosures here, came back down into this area of the park, and I believe it cut across in this area as well. But it basically encircled the whole park, or close to it the whole park. It has been removed, in recent years, and but it had a couple train stations. There was one here, and then there was one down, I believe, in this west corner of the park. In more recent years, they've added a tram-like system that kind of like the parking trams in the Disney parking lots, where it's a vehicle pulling a train, a gas-powered vehicle pulling a train of cars to take visitors on a tour of the zoo. And again, it would use all the same walkways that people use, and it basically just goes around the people and around the different walkways to show people the animal enclosures without having to walk around this insanely large zoo complex.